All right. Well, hello everybody. My name is Luke. I'm Gunpla Luke, as most of you probably know me. Um, this is advanced scribing, if that's what we'll call it, or we'll just say, scribing with thicker chisels and talking about design, placement, inspiration, and kind of how all that kind of molds together to get you a nice design. And then we'll talk about some fundamentals of working with thicker chisels because they are different than regular chisels when using them. So let's go ahead and talk about panel line design. Um, there is a ton of different kind of panel line design out there. That I mean, it's pretty much like just super like creative off the cuff for whatever people are doing for whatever build. I have three up here of my personal builds, and you can kind of see that some of them have different styles of panel line design. I have over here on the far left, this is the HG Haze and Play. I would say this is kind of a medium level of panel line design. There's not a lot of small, intricate lines. They're very large and over open spaces. I have the Zeta here in the middle, which is more mechanically accurate scribe detail based off of mechanical detail illustrations of the Zeta. So I would say this would be more of a realistic approach. And then to the far right, I have the art, or not the cloud jumper, the GM cloud jumper I did, which I would call that probably more hyper detailing, a lot of panel lines, probably not all necessary, but just for aesthetic value. Just very detailed for lots of color separation and interest and stuff like that. So choosing the right design for your build or the right design detail level is super important because it kind of just sets the pace for what your project is going to be. And sometimes it may sound good at the beginning to go with a lot of detail, but then you end up biting off more than you can chew later down the project. So this is kind of an example of just some different detail styles and levels and how it's important to kind of set the tone at the beginning of your custom build for what you want to do design level wise. Um, so so we're going to be using the shoulder of the GM as as kind of our topic today to talk about design, placement, qualities and elements and stuff like that. And I felt like the GM shoulder is a good one because I've done quite a bit of them, and so I have a lot of source material for them. So I have three options shown up of three builds. The far left is the cloud jumper. The middle is the HG ground GM, and then the far right is the master grade GM dominance. You can see that they're all the same piece on the same location of the body, and they share some similar elements across the three builds, even though they're different and with different detail levels and styles. And this is something that you'll see across a lot of builds is a lot of similar panel line design treatment for areas. So like we're talking about the shoulder here, you'll see a lot of certain styles or designs or elements on chests or on waist skirts or back skirts, legs, feet. They may be different, but a lot of them share very similar qualities and placement. Um, it's kind of just kind of naturally people have seen how people treat certain areas, and so they kind of start with those base concepts and then they build off of them. So that's kind of like whenever you're thinking of a design idea or a panel line design idea, sampling different work and then those same sections of different work will give you an idea of how other people are treating certain sections of a build and then how you can possibly pull a couple elements from that and then build off it on your own. The next one. So the next phase is, once you've kind of looked at a lot of inspiration, is getting your idea down on either a piece of paper or on your piece. Luckily, you can usually, if the plastic's the right color, you can draw with a pencil on the piece and then rub it away with your thumb to kind of find out what design you want to do. I always recommend having a plan for doing stuff like this, mainly because it takes a lot of time to do. And also you're heavily modifying the surface of your part to where if you mess up, it's either going to be a lot of work fixing it, or you're just going to kind of shelve that piece and try to get a new one. Depending on your skill level with fixing panel lines and stuff like that. And so I largely recommend sketching your designs out, sketching your piece. If you're not able to draw your piece, to draw on your piece with a pencil or take a photo of the section that you're working on and like on your phone or something, doodle with a pencil. One thing I use too is in the manual, like I'll go in the manual and I'll start drawing panel lines on parts of the pieces in the manual where like you're constructing it, or in some of the artwork. But at least getting some kind of plan down for what you attempt to do so that you can really decide, do you love this design? Does it work for the piece? And isn't it following the detail level that you're setting for the rest of the kit? Because you want everything to be cohesive. You want to love it because you're going to be working on it for a while and it's going to be on your shelf. And so making sure that you're prepared to go into whatever it is you're doing is having a plan will save you a lot of time and a lot of stress for doing something you maybe don't like. These are a couple examples of some sketches of parts that I've done. This was the far left is a sample of the Haze and Play leg. You can see I have like panel line set out with thinner lines, thicker lines. We'll talk about how those kind of work together and why it's kind of good to have those. But you can also see how with the scribe lines I've added, I have planned color separation in that too, so I can start to get an idea too of how those panel lines that I've created are also going to be a part of the paint process. And by no means is this a final like draft. It's just a kind of an idea that gets me really, really in the ballpark with what I want to do and better direction. On the right side is the back skirt for the Zeta Plus A1 that I did. This one I actually went full, like I did the color with it and everything. Planned plot plate and where it was going to go. And just because since I was doing a lot of big alterations to this piece, making sure that I had a good plan going into it. And what kind of lines were going to go where, what weights they were going to be, and stuff like that. It didn't turn out all like this. Some things didn't make it to the final design, but like I said, it got me in the ballpark and comfortable with starting the piece, and it's something that I was really happy with. So, all right. So let's talk about the design and the design process. So the shape that you see in front of you, this resembles the MG Sniper 2 shoulder piece. Reason why I started with this, or we're going to talk and use this as an example, is this is a very common shoulder shape you see in a lot of Fetty suits, especially in Gundams as well. And just it's a very popular shape and a good shape to talk about this because it's very open. It's not quite square, but yeah. So we're going to start with this. And when thinking about how you want to prep a panel line design on, we need to first think of the angles of the piece. Every piece on the build is going to be very different, and they're all going to provide their own angles and kind of outside shapes of the piece. We want to use these to our advantage in designing panel lines, mainly because these are the natural flow of the piece or the armor piece, and having lines that contradict these natural angles of the piece make your design feel like it's competing with the angles of the piece. And so, for example, like here on the shoulder, we have these perpendicular lines that are XY axis pretty much, and then we have this nice diagonal. And so what this tells me is that, and I designed this panel line, I want diagonals to be going with any kind of diagonals in the panel line to be going with the natural kind of left to right upward diagonal with the piece, so that it flows with the angle of the piece. I want up and down lines to be as parallel and perfect with the side and tops as much as possible. So this is one of the things I consider when designing a panel line for the piece. So next thing is we're going to start with a baseline. Whenever I think about a baseline, I think about something that I can branch other lines off of, and that this is going to serve as kind of the anchor line of the piece, and that provides the main, I would say, split or dividing the armor part up. I think about it as well, there's a few things you want to take in consideration, especially, and it requires a little bit of forethought, is what else are you like? What else is going to happen here on this part? Since it's a shoulder, I need to consider a decal, a marking decal. And so I don't want to do anything that cuts in like right through the middle of this, because then I'm not sure if I would like a panel line running straight through a decal. You can do that. I've done it before too, but I think about that a lot on shoulders specifically. Same with like waists or legs and things like that. But so I start with this first line, and you can see that, you know, we're following the natural lines of the piece as well as the diagonal. It's not quite the same angle, but we're still going from that bottom left to upper right, same here, so that our angles are still going the same direction of the piece, which makes it feel more natural than if it was going the other way, just by itself. And so, like I said, this will serve as the baseline that things will branch off of, and dividing the piece up and thinking of how this may be constructed realistically, if that's the goal of the build, is possible, like realism. Thinking about, well, how would this, you know, like if they were to service the shoulder piece, would they pull off one panel? Is this thing one piece? How can I divide it up to make it think like maybe they pull the top off to work on the top section of the shoulder? I don't know. It's kind of hard to get something super accurate since we are talking about fictional robots, but so that's the first line. The next line is something that just breaks up that long running line, that long horizontal line, just throwing in a perpendicular one to break it up so that not everything looks like it's running across it. And then also gives a good option for color separation too, whenever you're painting. So there's that. And then we'll get into kind of the rest of it all together. So thinking about color separation too, adding a little space for highlight, for like a highlight color that also flows. You can see it flows with the natural way of the piece, following the angles of the shoulder. And then getting into thicker panel lines to add what I call line contrast, which creates a lot more interest in panel lines. Having just, you know, one weight is okay. It's not, there's nothing wrong with it, but adding in multiple weights gives us many more options for shape, for line weight interest, and for just smaller details that you can't really do with these that you want to have some thicker chisels for. So in the second image, or the second section here, we've added some thicker lines to simulate like where they would open up a panel, or a latch here for where something like you could put a piece of flat plate or something like that. And then finally, on the far left one, adding a section on the bottom with a thicker chisel that would scribe out and be like a lower level of the shoulder. And so we've gone from just the basic shape to kind of following the natural flow of the shape and designing our panel line, and thinking about using our goal for the build of if we're doing like any kind of realism or things like that, or thinking about color, to plan a panel line that would give us opportunities to pursue more color separation, more mechanical detail interest, and then still have room for, our decals in the end. So we've kind of thought about everything that we're going to do and then plan that and take it into account in designing our panel line. So over here, this is what that base design and that diagonal would look like if we shifted it the other way. It's not terrible, but with the angles competing with each other that way, it doesn't exactly flow like the other one does. It's still not bad, but I prefer to try to follow the shape of the piece. And this is kind of something you'll have to decide on your own with what you like, and how you like your panel lines. If you like it, the angles competing, then really make sure that that's what you're doing across your entire build. If you're trying to follow the flow of your piece, make sure that you're doing that across your entire build. So whatever you choose, just choose to be consistent. But I would say, like, if you're going to do more competing lines with the shapes of the piece, to maybe start with, it's a little bit difficult. So start with kind of some easy wins of basic panel lines that follow the shapes of the piece to get you comfortable with designing your own lines and your design process. And then you can start doing little things that are a little more maybe out there or not normal or just different, and taking some risks. So do we have any, let's go ahead and open it up for questions on this section. Do we have any questions from anybody regarding this? If you do, please use the raise your hand feature, and we can go ahead and anybody? No, I don't see anything. Okay. Oh, see. Um, go ahead and unmute. There you go. Go ahead and ask your
So,
question.
okay. I guess because when I tried, yeah, I've tried a couple, I guess, panel lining and like scribing techniques in here and there. I think one of the parts that I like struggle the most with, I guess, is just trying to make sure that when I add the accents, like how do you determine these like accents? Because like I think that's the part I struggle the most with, where it's like, where's that small bit of like accent that I can add? And it's do you have any tips and tricks on where you determine, hey, this is where I want to throw on an accent?
Yeah.
Yeah,
So we'll
that
move back.
second step there.
Yeah. So we'll move back to this slide. So as far as accents go, I like to add them after all of the main lines are done. The reason why is, whenever we're scribing with that thicker chisel, it's a lot easier to scribe up next to an already existing panel line,
Right.
than it is to just go straight off the plastic. So having the base lines there is a great guide for the thicker chisel, and we'll kind of get to
Mm.
why that's important later on. But as far as the thicker accents go, I kind of just choose like where I think it looks the best. Like, I mean, so, and that's a pretty, I guess, subjective loose answer.
Yeah.
But like, so like looking at the sample over here, I kind of have like a middle element here, which means that like this section over here could use some interest. Same with over here. And I just kind of think about like what I would do if I was deconstructing this piece by piece, and then what I
Hmm.
would need to do. So like just thinking about like, and this could go anywhere. So you could have this thicker line over here, or you could have this notch over here and a thicker line over here. And that's why like I was talking about, like the sketching process is just sketch those thicker lines on there, and see where you like them and see if it makes sense. I like to throw these larger weighted lines next to right angles like that, just because it butts up so nicely to it. And then with things like this, I like to put these little notches off of like bigger panels or things like
Right.
that, or things that look like they're a lot larger and need something to get to lift up.
Right.
um, but mainly just trying out where things would go. Because like whenever I was building this slideshow for the presentation, I mean I was moving these around thinking where I would like them, which is the same thing I would do if I was planning a build. And
Right.
they look really nice here and made they didn't not make sense. So
Yeah.
I went ahead and went with them there. And so what I would do is once you have your baselines down, um, go in with a pencil some more and just chalk up where they could be. And if you really like them and they don't not make sense, then I would say go ahead and scribe them in. But yeah, mainly trial and error, um, and just working through like for example whenever I was in a so I'm a graphic designer, and
Oh,
back in school they would be like come to us with 50 sketches for a logo,
right.
and it's like they want us to get everything out, and so that's what I would recommend is like get everything out to find the thing you love,
Right.
and yeah, so
That's
sketch it out, and there's really no right or wrong,
right.
but
For sure. For
yeah,
sure.
but you
Yeah.
can see the difference. You can see the difference in like just the interest of the design from no thicker chisel weights to adding thicker chisel weight, um, for sure.
Agreed. All right.
So
Thank you
I
for
hope I
that.
answered your question.
Oh, no, no, no. I think the main focus for me is that sketching out part where I just need to like plan things out a little bit more, because I think sometimes I just get a little excited, just draw stuff on there. I'm like, all right, what next, right?
Yeah. Definitely a little more patience, I would say. So,
Sure.
uh, sounds good. All right. Leon, go ahead and
Yeah, um, a thing that I found myself just struggling with, it's not, I mean, also the designs, because I do need a bit of help with those. That's why I'm mainly here. But with the thicker chisels, I found that getting in those corners, there's usually like the corner that meets up with the smaller one,
Mhm.
like the inside corner,
Like here.
and it leaves a little bit of like of an uneven surface, and it's kind of confusing on how to get there without like messing up the piece, or like rounding out the corner in some way.
Okay. Do you mind if we rain check that question until like the demo where because I think that would apply more to whenever we actually do it, and then we get into kind of a thicker
Yeah.
chisel examples. Is
All
that
right.
okay?
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay,
That's fine.
sweet. Yeah, we're kind of going to go over that later. And so I think that would be a better time to answer your question.
All right. Perfect.
Sweet. Do we have any more questions? Any more? Okay, we will continue. Uh, okay, so here I have a few builds up from some people that I am inspired by. I have the credits below if you're interested in checking them out on Instagram. So when we talked about kind of the design of a shoulder piece, following the angles, and keeping in mind the space for color and for decals, these were three really good examples that I thought really demonstrated those. Um, and this is kind of something you would do with if you're planning your build is looking at other people's work and seeing like getting inspired by what kind of things they're doing and how they're handling certain sections like we talked about earlier. So over here like on the dom shoulder, you can see he's kind of following the same like natural arc of the piece with the panel lines moving over, and these angles are all working with the same sort of diagonal down from the shoulder. So he's working up and over with the natural arc of the piece, as well as following the same design language of the shape of the piece and breaking it up along the way, to make sure that it's not just one long horizontal line, that he has some vertical breaks into the line. Over here on the Jagan shoulder, same thing. You can see like his lines here are following the way the piece is shaped, the edge of the piece. The diagonal here is following this diagonal rule. This is following sort of this angle, and then this line is following the angle of the piece here. And so he's basically creating a panel line around the vent that's following the shape of the piece and the shape and edges of the piece while still leaving a lot of room for the decal. And here breaking it up, we're like, if they're servicing or cleaning this vent, you would pull off this armor part so you don't have to pull off the whole shoulder. And so so he did a really good job of a realistic design that flows well with the shape of the shoulder piece while keeping in mind, future color separation and decal usage. A lot of you guys in the showing what you bought are very familiar probably with Taylor's work, 514 Studios. He's a good friend of mine. And he did his Nemo here with the shoulder piece is absolutely incredible. Doing a lot of the same stuff too, following the natural lines of the piece up and over while keeping a future kind of eye out for decal placement, but also with a realistic approach of getting into that shoulder to clean that vent or get that vent out, while providing a lot of good options for color separation. So these were just three examples that I thought looked really well for all of the things we've talked about. And oh my, there we go. And just kind of show you like how this is not just something that I'm doing, but kind of like a thing that's pretty common across, designing panel lines and how you can be vastly different in your own panel line design while following a lot of sort of the same, I would say, rules, not really rules, but just same kind of direction that a lot of other people are doing. So you can still be different while doing following good kind of just design language. So here is an example of some examples of different thicker panel line design elements and how they integrate with regular lines. Starting up here, this is a waist section of the Hazenfly, and you can see where I have some notches here, and some thicker lines integrated into the main design itself as like we talked about, how would this panel be lifted up or removed? Over here on the A1 waist, back waist, I have some thicker lines, at the top of this claw plate area. Since we have a lot of just regular lines going in, adding some thicker lines to give that line contrast. Same here with on the claw plate section of adding a thicker line across the rectangle to simulate like a latch. Same with underneath the claw plate section to simulate like a latch of how maybe this would be removed. Similar here. Over here on the arm, I have a lowered section using like a 1 millimeter chisel that just lowers an edge section of the arm to give a place for a panel line and color separation, but also changing the surface level of the piece. So using chisels to change surface level of the edges or sections of the piece to provide a little more interest to the shape. Another section here on the A1, these larger chiseled areas for I would say external mechanical detail that I'm not really sure what their practical use is, but I would say like, if they were used to grab onto from some machine to lift the part off or something like that. Here on the EZSR kneecap, I have a thicker line running around it to create a bigger gap between panels of the piece to kind of maybe to give like panels a little more room to breathe, like they're not exactly butted up together, kind of making things feel a little more spacious. And then over here on the Marisai shield, I just have some thicker lines next to like the main line like we saw before to add some contrast, but also thinking about how those panels would be lifted up. So these are a few design elements that I've incorporated into my work a lot, and I've seen a lot of people do too. They're not really new, but these are just some things you can do with the combination of thinner chisels and thicker chisels and how you can use them. Okay, so let's look at a section of a build. So this build or this section is from the Cloud Jumper, and you can see the integration of thicker or chisel weights across the build. And then opposed to this build, which is sort of hard to see, but this build has no thicker chisels on any of the panel lines. And in my personal opinion, this one has way more interest due to the different weights across the panel lines. It gives more interest to the shapes of the piece, the panel line designs, and not doesn't make everything just look flat. I've started to prefer this design style over just regular or one size chisel panel lining. Um, things look a lot flatter whenever there's only one weight. And the addition of extra weight has provided a lot more interest, I think, in my designs. As far as a process, I find it more enjoyable, and then as an end result, I think they just look really nice. So that's a comparison between something that has them and something that doesn't. So does anybody have any questions about any of the like design elements or things like that that we just went over? I don't know if there was really time for or anything to ask questions on, but Leon, do you have another question? I see your hand is still raised. Yes, no, sir.
Sorry, I didn't know my hand was still raised.
You're
I thought
good.
I
You're
thought
good.
it would go up and it would just be like a little notification. So
Yeah,
is it
you're good.
lowered
I just
now?
wanted to double check.
Okay, it's lowered.
You're good. All right. So next we'll talk about thicker chisel habits. So thicker chisels are a lot different than your thinner like 0.2 or 0.15 chisels. With thicker chisels, your surface area now for scribing is a lot wider, which changes the game on how you do it, how careful you do it, because with a thicker chisel comes bigger mistakes, and that's kind of the big downside is that if you make a mistake with a bigger chisel, it's not going to leave a scratch, it's going to leave a gash. So that's so when using thicker chisels, I really emphasize more on patience and control more than any kind of added pressure or anything. And then just I have here some suggested ways to use them, and why we should use them that way, due to what happens. So here, I always recommend holding the chisel at a 45-degree angle when doing your line. This allows the blade to do all the work. It's also going to leave a smoother finished surface for your line than if you were to hold it a different way. So over here, I have it where like if the chisel is at like 90 degrees with the panel line, this doesn't let the chisel smoothly pull away plastic. You're more cutting into it using force to drag it across the line, and your panel lines at the bottom end up looking something like this as the chisel skips across the surface. And so when using thicker chisels, always remember to keep them at a 45-degree angle just to make sure that the blade is doing the maximum amount of work for you, because good chisels are going to be very sharp. And scribing is very effortless as far as pressure goes, because the blades are so sharp and so they do all the work. So just remember to let your chisel do the work. It'll also thank you later too, because you can chip your chisel blade doing it this way, or possibly break it because you're putting a lot more force on this section. So you're putting a lot more force on the chisel here. So yeah, that's a no-no. This next one is, since we talked about the width of the chisel has now gotten wider versus something so thin like a 0.2 or 0.15. Even pressure, or even I guess weight distribution from side to side of the chisel is very important. Keeping it as straight down as possible will keep an even panel line, an even chisel line as much as possible. if you're favoring one side or the other of the chisel, your panel line will start to end up looking like this. And one of the reasons why this is a no-no is because whenever you get to the later part of your build when you're panel lining and you drop in panel liner in this section, all that panel liner is going to pull here. And so you're just going to have a dark section here rather than the whole section being dark. You'll just have it pulled up into the edge. And you'll either have to A, put in more panel liner, or B, try to re-scribe out that section to where it's level. And also too, doing it this way, you can end up roughing your corners here and chipping a part of the plastic. Since these are so sharp, it's easy to make a mistake like that. So, I think so. When doing thicker chisels, I've mentioned a size pairing, I think, in talking about the stuff before. And what I mean by that is what chisels look good next to other chisels, and how they contrast. If you guys are familiar with contrast, too much contrast can be very distracting. Like a color scheme where the colors next to each other, they contrast too much and it's distracting rather than easy on the eye. Same with panel lines, and the weight of panel lines with the chisels. If you have a really thin chisel like a 0.15 next to or with a thicker chisel integrated at like a 0.8, the contrast is just way too different and it doesn't look very natural for the size of the main line versus what the latch or thicker chisel area would be for it. It's kind of like painting painting a detail that's like 136 scale on a like 144 scale or something. You're not thinking about how they pair at that scale and the contrast between the two. And so here I have some examples of some different like line contrasts and size pairings that I've used in the past, and that I kind of mainly stick with. Over here on the silver bullet leg, you can see like my thicker chisel areas that are across some parts of the build. I mainly use a 0.15 millimeter for my main lines. I think this is a very good size for just about every scale out there. I don't think you can miss with it. It's very small, which provides that what panel lines are, the space between panels. So 0.15 works very well. And what I found works nicely with a 0.15 is a 0.4 millimeter for my thicker chisel weight. It's not too thick. It's not too small, and I think it works very well with a 0.15. Also, a 0.52 is not too bad. It can get a little bit on the thicker side if you're doing a smaller kit. So thinking about the size of the kit too is important. If you're doing a 0.5 on like an HG with the 0.15, it can look a little out of place. But I recommend if you're using a 0.15 to use a 0.4, and then if you're using a 0.2, use a 0.5. As far as heavier chisels for other sections, I would always recommend kind of just keeping different sizes for whatever needs you may have. But if you're integrating them within your lines, I recommend kind of keeping that at least like 0.3 millimeter difference between your main line and thicker chisel line examples. So like over here too, I have the thinner lines with the 0.4, 0.4, 0.4, 0.4, stuff like that across it. And it, like I said, I think it just looks pretty good next to the 0.15. Same with over here. It's not too drastic, but it's thick enough to be noticed against a 0.5, I mean a 0.15. So that's something to keep in mind is the size pairings is what looks good next to each other, and if it contrasts too much or too little, think about changing that in the future. Do we have any questions on chisel size pairings or anything like that? Yes, no, please. Okay. I think it's just a demo. Okay, so now we're gonna actually do some thicker chisels, chisel work. I'm gonna stop the share and we're gonna move over to the desk cam. What we'll do is I'll be doing stuff and explaining it as I go on the desk cam. And if you have something in front of you that you want to work on and try to go at pace, we can do that, or you can do that. That's totally fine. I'll still keep going at the pace that I'm going, and we'll do questions afterwards. I'll probably explain one of the earlier questions about thicker chisels during the process, but we'll just go through it, and then since I won't be able to look at the screen, Willard, if you see somebody raise their hand, I don't mind if we ask questions during the thing. If you see somebody raise their hand, just let me know. And what we're gonna do is we're just gonna do a couple different kinds of thicker chisel work that are very common that you would do even if they were butted up against the normal lines. So let's go ahead and get switched over. So stop sharing. Let's see. Start video. Okay. I'll turn this off. All right. Can everybody see the desk cam clearly? Like, is it large on your screen or? Yeah.
Is this still focused on your other
Oh,
camera that you just?
let me remove spotlight. Okay. Can everybody see that better? That should have made a spotlight for.
Yep.
That should be good now.
Okay. Okay, sweet. So the piece that I'm going to work on for the demo is not a shoulder, because I feel like we talked about that enough, and showing on a different piece would kind of maybe be a better example of how to just create something basic on another piece. So I'm going to be working on this one. What we're going to do is we're going to create a smaller, like thicker notch that just goes on the side here. You can kind of see it there. There we go. And then we're going to scribe a larger rectangular section at the top of the piece like that. That kind of alters the edge of the piece. And this will cover pretty much everything that goes into thicker chisel work, on whether you're scribing into main plastic or if you're doing any kind of edge altering. This will cover basically everything you need to know without us having to do all the different kinds of details. So what I like to do when working with thicker chisels is I like to use larger scribe tape. This is a 5mm from Display. The reason why is when you're doing thicker chisels, you're using a larger blade, and a larger blade can move smaller tape because there's not as much adhesive surface area as there is on a thicker piece of tape. And so I prefer using the 5mm when working with thicker chisels. And like I've said, everything, all the other main lines are done by the time I get to thicker chisels, so I'm not really needing smaller tape. So what we're gonna do is I'm just gonna create an area to scribe it. So I'm gonna put the line down that's where the tape down for everything to go vertically, and then I'm gonna use the reason why I love Display so much is these millimeter marks. I'm going to use the millimeter marks to determine how long it's going to be, because we want that to be consistent across all our builds. If we're doing that kind of detail, it makes the consistency across of that detail across your kit look like there was a lot more planning into the build. And so for things like that, I like to just keep a 2mm. So I'll put one on the top, and let's see. Come on the top, and then the last one on the bottom for a 2mm size latch or notch or whatever we want to call it. Sweet. Okay. So we have that, and our scribe area is going to be in this zone right here. So I'm going to use a 0.5 for this. Like I said, we're going to hold the chisel at 45-degree angles, and we're going to go slow and let the chisel do the work. I'm doing my best to kind of keep all the even pressure down, down instead of favoring one side. And as you can see, like as we're going from left to right, we're building up that plastic on the side since we're removing a lot more than a regular panel line. So after we do a couple passes one way, we need to flip it and we need to start the other way, just to remove that plastic buildup from the edge. Okay. So back to that question when you asked about the plastic buildup on the side and how it can be uneven whenever you're whenever you're scribing that way. What I like to do is, if you have chisels that look like this, is you can push shave the plastic. So like I can come in like this and I can push against the corner and push plastic down to try to level that out. And then I can come in at the top here and basically cut it and then do the same to this side. Push it and then come in at the top and cut it. And you can tell that I'm going a lot slower. If this was a normal panel line, it would be going a lot faster, mainly because, like I said, these, if you mess up with these thicker chisels, it's a bigger gash. It's a lot more to remove. And so we'll go ahead and pull the tape off for that, and I can show you. I'll sand it. So now we have a thicker notch here that it's basically just like scribing a regular panel line. We're focusing a lot more on control, a lot more on patience because of the different chisel size. It's going to feel a lot different than a regular chisel. You're removing a lot more plastic, and it's going to make you feel like you need to put more force to remove a lot more plastic. And it's quite different where we actually want to not give into that and focus more on control. And so I just use a toothbrush to clean everything out once it's done. So we have a small little thicker chisel area there. And then what we'll do now is we'll do that thicker section up top. When doing things like that, I recommend using a larger chisel, such as a like a 0.1, or I mean not a 0.1, a 1 millimeter. Mainly because you don't want to try to scribe the exact size of the rectangle that you're trying to remove from the edge or something like that. You want it to be a little bigger with overhang so that you're making sure that you're cutting everything off correctly. And so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to add the tape here. Decide how thick I want it, and using the millimeter marks, I can adjust. Now, the thicker edge areas are a lot more tricky, mainly because you can now go over the edge, and that can fuck up your piece too. So we're going to do the same thing. And being patient and scribing the line. And you can see too how whenever I do this, I set up all the tape for the scribe section before I start going, so that I have tape on each side to stop my chisel from going further than intended. That's one thing I always recommend when scribing a regular line, a thicker line, whatever you plan on doing, is laying out all the tape for whichever line you're scribing at the moment, so that your chisel has a place to stop and doesn't overshoot corners, or round your corners, or just completely miss connections between lines overall. It's not very good. Oh. Another thing when doing thicker lines like this, not just on the edge, but if you're doing bigger ones, is outlining them. So I've sort of scribed away a thicker area there. Leon, do you have a question?
Yeah, I was wondering how many passes do you usually do over panel line? Because I'm still there, like a little bit messed up on like how many passes I do. I usually just eyeball it, and that's pretty much it. Since I have a
That
pretty strong.
Yeah, that's a good question. I usually recommend like 15. I like my panel lines deep, and one of the reasons why is because whenever you mask, if you can like whenever you mask and cut your masking tape, you can sometimes fold a little bit of that in the panel line, which will help with no paint bleed whatsoever. So I like my panel lines deep, but also eyeballing it is just as good because you never know. Like you may be cutting through really well, and you may not have to do 15, or you may just be not doing your chisel may not be cutting as much and you may have to do more. So just making sure that it's a good like it looks like it's a good depth. And one way to check is to like once you finish your panel line design or scribing, just throw a little bit of panel liner in there, like from like a Tamiya panel liner, and see if it fills the panel line. Does it hold the panel liner well? Because that's going to be what's important. You want to make sure it's deep enough to withstand the primer, the paint, the gloss coat before you put in that panel liner. So it's kind of an experience thing. Whenever you have your first time where it's too shallow, you'll know. And so then it'll be like going forward, you'll realize what is deep enough because of that experience. And so yeah, a lot of it is experience based on something like that.
Okay, yeah. So like 15 on each side, or like 15 overall is what you're implying.
I would start with 15 on one side, and then if I don't make it to 15 and it's already deeper going the
Okay.
other way, then I'll just stop there. Yeah. If it looks good, then it looks good.
All right.
Sweet. Sweet.
Okay.
So back to what I was saying on this thicker chisel section is whenever you remove a lot of plastic like this, like we talked about with this section, is plastic can not get removed evenly. And to make sure that we have an even section, I like to frame the inside of the thicker line. So I'm taking a 0.15 here, and I'm just scribing the inner edge that I created with a thicker chisel. Um, what this is going to do is if I decide to leave it like this, it means that panel liner will flow on the edge of this section really nicely and not just pull up in the corners. But also, whenever I come in to level this, I've scribed deep enough down to where whenever I come push level the line with the chisel, it's just going to cut right off because I've already scribed the edges and basically made an edge for it to be clipped off. So I just do that to where if I decide to leave it, panel liner looks good in it, or if I need to come in here and level by push leveling like this, it'll break off easily because I've scribed it, and it will make a level surface. Um, that. I think that will wrap up this one. Wrap up this section, and so I'll pull it off, sand it, and then you can kind of see now I have like a rectangle alteration to the top of the piece. Um, then you can clean this up later too, like if you need to, if you want it even smoother. You can clean it up with like a little bit of sanding sponge, sandpaper, come into the line here and just sand it. That'll help too. So now we've done a couple a couple thicker lines, and now we'll do like how I would do it if I was doing it off of a main line. Let me get some more scribe tape set up. So you know their hands raised. And what we'll do is we'll do kind of like that diagonal line I did on the shoulder on this waist piece, and then do a thicker line right off of it. So let's come in that like that. So I'm just gonna go ahead and scribe this regular line. And a basic scribing tip too is you can see that whenever I'm rotating around the piece and not my hand, just making sure that I'm keeping the chisel comfortable and in control. And doing the whole line here, this helps keep your corners sharp instead of rounded, because they can easily become rounded. And that comes from not rotating your piece while you're scribing. So I did that. Go ahead and remove that. Out. Sand this so you guys can see. So we're gonna do some thicker chisel lines off of that main one that we just did. And what we're gonna do is, like I recommended, go ahead and do your main line first, so that you can line up tape on it and have a sort of a base guide for your thicker chisel line to guide on. So we're gonna go ahead and put it up top here. Give me a piece of tape. And then I want to decide how long it's going to be. So we'll say 2. I'm going to take a 0.4. We're going to do the same thing we talked about. Just being patient. Let the chisel do the work. And add a thicker line into our design. Thicker chisels, with them being a lot sharper, you don't have to do a ton of passes. You are pulling away a lot more plastic. Okay. So we've now added a thicker line into it. So it'll look a lot better when there's a panel liner in there. But so we have a thicker line into the main line, and then you could just continue adding a thicker notch there too. But those are kind of some of the basics of applying thicker chisels in practice. They do require a lot more work, a lot more patience, and a lot more control. But does anyone have any other questions so far, or about scribing, or scribing in general, or scribing with thicker chisels? Yeah, you got another question, Leon? Is it working?
Yeah, when you actually were scribing right now, that you started off with uh, going straight for the corner, I don't usually do that because I find myself when I start to turning the chisel, to actually round off the corners more than I would without going for the whole line in one go, which is something I don't know. I use the spade chisels, so it might have a little bit of different um like a different feel to it.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, if you're using like it's like the hook one, yeah, like the hook to space, scribe chisel stuff, right?
No, not the hook one. I use the push broach ones. They don't have as long as a blade. Like they're not as what's it called? They don't have like the long blade. That they just have like a big like square piece, and then at the end they have their blade at just at like a 45-degree angle.
Hmm. It may be the shape, but also it could be like if your chisel is at an angle while you're rotating, you may be cutting that corner. It could be a number of different things. I've just noticed that like whenever I do the line all in one go like that while rotating the piece with the chisel, it helps keep my corners a lot sharper than if I didn't do that. Mainly so I don't accidentally chip a corner by missing where I'm putting the chisel. Because it is also easy to do that where you could just miss the connection entirely, and then you now have a rounded corner or a chipped corner, which can be even worse.
Yeah. All right. That must be like just the difference in like how tools feel compared to each other. So probably
Yeah, it
it's
could be.
very different.
Yeah, it could be. Like what? Because like what works for me may not exactly work for everybody else, but kind of sharing how I do it might help somebody find the way that works for them. Um,
Yeah.
but
All right.
yeah, any more questions? Because I think that kind of covers everything I had planned to go over. Unless anyone has any questions about talking about any other things they want to know about. It could be scribing related or back to the presentation or whichever.
I have a question.
What's up?
This is Maker here. How are you doing?
Good. How are you?
Great. When I try to chisel longer pieces with thicker chisels, like say point 0.5, sometimes I end up having a more deeper or dips in the middle than the edges
Hmm.
or the bookends. Let's say for the bookends. So I would end up having like it kind of go down. I mean, it ends up like a bowl shape instead of flat surface. What's wrong with that?
So that's from whenever we start at the edge of the scribe line, we're definitely focusing more on like control, making sure that we're lining it up with the tape and with the corner. And then as we're going across it, it's the comfortability of now that you're going, your pressure has added a little more, and the control is you're still having control, but you're adding just a little more pressure because you're not having to worry about lining it up with anything. And so it's natural that you're favoring the middle because I do that too. Um, and what needs to happen afterwards is you need to come in and clean up those edges. And what I mean by that is I'm gonna mock up a visual representation for you. Because it does happen quite a bit.
Yeah,
Uh,
it happens too often that I say, okay, this is not a fluke. This is something
yeah,
is wrong with me.
it's just favor. It's just favoring like as you're going, you're now more comfortable. Um,
Is it
So
possibly because I'm not sliding and using my wrist down that way? It shouldn't be wrist down. It should be just whole arm slide.
um no, because I still do it whenever I'm doing it that way as well. It still happens. And what I think it is like I said, I think it's just like we're comfortable now that we've started the line and
Hmm.
we're moving we're the
It's like
chisel
get
now
it right.
is more at a 45-degree angle, and so it's cutting better versus whenever it's at the start of the line. Um, so I'm gonna real quick because I have it mocked up now.
Okay.
Let's see. Let's stop the pin on this one. Remove spotlight. Start sharing. Can everybody see this example
Yeah.
here?
Yes.
All right, so this is what you're
Yep.
talking about is
Yeah.
how yeah, so you're bowing here in the line and
Yeah.
definitely want to even this out because panel liner will pull here and it won't give us the full definition of our line.
Mm-hmm.
Um and so what I do is so this is our chisel, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I come in here and I like instead of going like this to try to level it out, because what ends
Mm-hmm.
up happening is we still just end up following the same motion trying to level it out, and this just becomes deeper. So what
Mm-hmm.
I do is I'll take the chisel and I'll go at like a 90 degrees with it real quick, and I'll go and I'll push it down like this a
Yeah.
little
Yeah.
bit
Right. Right.
to where I've created a cut, and
Yes.
then let me and then I'll come in after I've made that cut. I'll come in with and push and like push broach it basically.
Right.
I'll come in and I'll push it and I'll push the plastic until it connects with that cut, and then that plastic will just kind of pop out.
Well, the way I was told is that the orientation of your tape, of your chisel, should be the other way around if you want to push. Am I correct?
So I like it this way because it's like uh those carpentry shaving tools. This is how the blade is focused on
Okay.
those as well. And
Okay.
so I
Mm-hmm.
believe you're getting the best edge on this, and the plastic is naturally folding over this
Okay.
um, or this I guess horizontal. I think it probably works either way. If 'Cause I've
Well,
never actually
yeah.
tried it this way, but it looks like it's still the same shape. The
Yeah.
plastic is still folding over a diagonal with a level, a level chisel area, and you're still getting the full use of the blade. But that's the tactic I use in leveling out those bows and those thicker lines is by making a push down here to make a cut, and then push chiseling away the extra plastic there.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
That makes sense?
Yeah. I think I've been trying to do something similar to that too.
Okay, sweet. Um, okay, so there's I'm checking the chat here. So George says it's hard to stick scribe take on 144 pieces. That is 100% true. A lot of the pieces are a lot smaller, but what I recommend is one, sanding your part before you start scribing helps with sticking your tape to the piece. It basically scores the surface for a better connection with the piece to the tape. But also what I've found with smaller pieces and scribing on smaller pieces and having to apply a lot of tape is size to piece economy. If I had a small piece, if I was let's say, oh, what's a good example? I don't really have one, but if I had a small piece that I was about to scribe and I was using a bigger piece of tape, you think it would be okay because the bigger piece of tape is a larger piece, it has more sticky, but if we're scribing on a smaller piece, all that tape may not be on the smaller piece. And so now we have not a lot of sticky for a larger piece of tape. And so I recommend using a lot smaller pieces of tape for the smaller sections to try to get a better size to tape for how much is actually on the piece. I guess relationship. It's hard to use bigger pieces of tape on smaller pieces just because they are a lot larger, and you sometimes you need even more. You need more of it on there for it to be worth it. And then the other question: when did you find out you were a chisel wizard? Um, Out of the womb. I'm just kidding. Okay.
I had your
No problem.
question
Go ahead.
regarding scribing tape, like taking it off after like you apply it.
Yeah. Wait, I think you're cutting out.
What? I'm sorry.
You were cutting out. What was your full question? Say it again.
Hold on.
You can just type in the chat too if you want.
Okay, so I'm sorry. When you were applying the scribing tape right now, you were having like a really easy time like repositioning it as.
Uh-oh.
Wait, are you still referring
I can't hear your full question. You keep cutting in and
to
out.
me or
Willard, is he cutting out for you too?
can anybody hear me?
Yes.
I keep on cutting out.
Yeah. I was gonna say if you want to type your question in the chat, then
Is this better over here?
so far, yeah.
Okay. You were having a really easy time repositioning it as well. For me, it kind of is kind of rough. Like it sticks a lot, and also like sometimes some of the glue that's on the back of the tape stays on the plastic actually pretty often when I take it off.
So what I would say is what tape are you using?
I'm using the spray 3 millimeter.
Okay. I've never had that problem with display with leaving residue on the plastic. But as you see, like after I scribe something or after I finish a piece or whatever detail I'm doing, I sand it. And if it's leaving any kind of residue like that, I would recommend maybe it's like hitting it with like a 600 grit and then 800 or something like that to try to get as much of whatever that is off the piece so that it's not there during your paint and finish process. Um, and then as far as like repositioning, I mean if you're pulling the tape on and off, you're obviously going to lose some of the stickiness. But
Of course.
usually having like when we talked about having the plan of the design already, or it laid out on the piece, it's whenever we have that plan, we can normally just place the tape on there and it's good to go. We don't have to reposition as much if we're trying to really correct the shape or something like that. But I mean, worst case scenario, like you pull the piece off and it starts losing its sticky, you just put a new one on there. Scribe tape's pretty cheap.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't worry too much about, if the stickiness is gone or if it's too much and you're having trouble removing it. Just get a new piece of tape and see if it starts better, or just using thinner, smaller pieces of tape. Since it's not as much stickiness, it'll work pretty well.
Yeah. It might have been a better option to get like a smaller scribing tape in this case because I pretty much only am working on high grades at the moment. So
Yeah, thicker piece of
easier to
thicker
manage
piece of
something
tape.
smaller.
yeah, it'll feel a lot more sticky with this one more piece.
Yeah.
Okay. Next question. Go ahead.
Yeah, I guess, and this is probably not like kind of like not within the scope of the conversation today, but I guess do you have any like quick tips on like achieving like symmetry, I guess? Because I think one of the thing is like one part is design, then the other part is like drawing it, and then the next part is like, okay, you have one shoulder piece that's done, and then you have another one that you kind of need to do the same thing on, and I think that's the part where I usually get really stressed out on. So I'm like, oh no, like I did this one nice work on one shoulder and I have to do it on the other one.
Yeah. As far as I go with symmetry, what makes my life a lot easier is is the display tape, is measuring. It takes a lot more time, but using the millimeter marks on the display for measuring helps a lot with symmetry,
Right.
and it's something I use a ton. But
Right.
like I say, it takes a lot of time, but I feel like I'm saving time by if I have my design planned out already, then I can go straight into laying it out and measuring it. And
Mm,
so I feel like I'm being a little bit more efficient, even though that takes a lot more time. I'm not going through and doing a bunch of different design iterations and everything and trying to find out what I want to do. I feel like I'm kind of getting my time back. But another thing too is let me find a good example of what might be a way to talk about it. Because one thing I also use is every part has kind of like keys on the piece to
Yeah.
use as a reference for something to help.
right.
So for example, if I'm maybe if I'm doing a diagonal, let me switch over to back to the desk cam um real quick. Let's go. Okay, so this is the MG Nemo I'm working on, and if
Mm,
I am doing this, let's say I'm detailing up like this front skirt right here,
right.
right?
Right.
And I want to do like a diagonal, and I want to make sure that diagonal is in like the same spot
Mm,
for everything. So like if I ended up doing like a line that's I don't know if it's going to be easy to see on the dark plastic, something like if you can see that a little bit.
I can kind of see it, yeah.
Yeah. So if I'm doing something like that and I have a diagonal and I want to make sure that diagonal is in the same spot across the other side, what I can use is keys on the piece that will help me with that. And so what I
Mhm.
notice is that like I could go from the corner of this piece or this section
Right.
all the way down to this one, and it makes a diagonal, and I can use those as key parts of the piece to make that
Right.
diagonal is going to be in the same spot. And
Right.
so using references across your piece, I mean, like you're using the edges, the angles. If a piece has detail or something like that, using them for references to parts of your design.
That makes sense.
So
Yeah.
that's one thing I use a lot because especially like when somebody asks about curved scribing and stuff like that, that's one thing I use a lot in curve scribing because it's hard to
Mhm.
measure on a curved surface, but if I
Right.
can get tape lined up with certain elements on the curved area, then I know it's going to work out because I'm now connecting one section to another section with a straight line, and then I
Mm,
can do that again across another thing. But yeah, those are also big things because we might as well use all the help we can get on a piece already. Um,
for sure.
Eh, May
but
I
yeah,
may I may I add to that, please?
sure.
Um, what I actually came across another video the other day that there's another technique that addresses exactly that. Let's say, for example, what you just did to one side of the skirt, you made one design, and what you could do is use a compass to mark just like what you said from edges to the turning points. Using compass to mark to measure the point, and then go to the other side and use a compass to mark exactly the same spot.
Right.
That's basically like I don't have a sharp enough compass, and that's where just use the measuring. because
Mhm.
I'll just do like a, it's so many millimeters down and so many millimeters over kind of thing. So you can use a compass to get by with that, by that a lot quicker. But like just using those things like a compass and those key points on pieces will help you with symmetry. And it may take you a little bit longer, but in my opinion, like as perfect as we can get, symmetrical lines is always very nice
For
and
sure.
worth the time. Worth the time.
All right.
But yeah,
Yeah. 100%. Yeah.
compasses, tape, key points on the piece are all great things, and two of them I use all the time.
Yeah. All right. Awesome. All right. Thanks.
Yeah. Any other questions? I know we kind of moved through things a little fast. I don't know if that was too fast. Willard, do you wanna take over?
No, I don't have to. I think we pretty much does anybody else have any other questions at all, or is everybody kind of happy with everything so far?
Yeah, everything's right. Yeah,
Yeah.
pretty
So,
clear, everything. Perfect.
yeah, Luke, I don't know, like if you think that it's time to wrap it up, then we can wrap it up as well if nobody has any other questions. I think it's a good time kind of to bring up that if anybody is interested in working one-on-one with Luke, feel free to reach out to him. He's been doing this for about a year now, just kind of helping people out with it. So speak to him if you guys are interested in doing one-on-one sessions with him. And otherwise, yeah, I think that's pretty much it. Thanks everybody for joining today. If you guys do have any other questions, feel free to ask questions in the Discord. Everybody's always willing to help out. And we can definitely also get everybody together to have some build sessions if anybody has any questions in like a week or so after they've managed to put some of this stuff into practice. So yeah, I think that's pretty much all I have to say then from this point on.
Yeah, I'll follow up with that. Yeah, if you guys want, what I would totally suggest is go ahead and grab like some spare pieces and just start practicing coming up with designs. One thing I keep all the time and I do a lot of my stuff in is a sketchbook. Get yourself a sketchbook to come up with designs. I'll kind of show you just what's like kind of the things I keep inside and like what's so like inside I have like panel line designs that I've either come up with or like and build upon them, stuff like that. I have sketches of pieces and just kind of where I keep like ideas and measurements and things like that for builds. Let's get to some of this stuff for the so yeah, things like that I do a lot. Get yourself a sketchbook, practice, practice is super important. Especially too, like if you're wanting to up your I guess design game too is spend more time looking at good work, good inspiration, things like that, and then applying it. And don't be afraid to mess up either.
That little sketchbook looks like a gold mine. If you ever release that as an illustration book, it'd be amazing.
Maybe in the book I'm working on. I think there's going to be some sketch sections in the book I'm working on. So that may be in there. But yeah, sketchbook, super handy. Also, like, I'll show you too. Like, I mean, so like some of y'all know I do like the private lessons and everything. And so like I just have pieces of different designs and parts that I've worked on during those and coming up with things and showing like people how to do stuff. And so just get you some spare parts and a bag and start practicing different designs and things like that.
Don't be shy. Getting kits that are cheaper or parts that you have, that you're not using anymore, and just practice on them. The more you do it, the easier it gets, and it becomes a lot less scary.
Yes. There's a lot of comfort in gaining experience doing this. You'll get faster, and you'll get faster at doing it and better at doing it. And then also don't hesitate to message me on Instagram if you have questions. I'm always available there to see any pictures or answer any questions you have. And then, like Willard said, if you want to take this even further and schedule some time with me or whatever, I can definitely show you what people have learned from me during those, and if you want to go even further. So yeah, I think that's all I got.